talk to her out. Question is, what that coach? And I didn't take it to the house, you know? I had it still sitting there.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome. That's a more official welcome. Welcome to the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of November 1st. This year has flown by. We're a committee of the board that deals with matters relating to electoral areas, as the name applies. And we respectfully acknowledge that we live and work on the traditional territories of many First Nations, 10 of them in fact, the Kwatsan, the Pakoshan, the Malahat, the Tsubasset, the Pachidat and Dididat, Halalt, Liaxin, Penelakut, and Stuminas. And we offer our gratitude to those First Nations for their care of the territories that we are responsible for making decisions about, and their teachings. And we hope we can respectfully bring those teachings to the decisions that we make. So with that, let me turn to the directors. Does anyone have any announcements or things I'd like to say today? Director Abbott is joining us by WebEx, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, everyone else is here. So with that, we should move on to the approval of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We have one new agenda item. So the agenda be amended with the addition of one new business item. This will be under NB1 closed. It's a closed agenda item. Subsection 92B, closed session verbal report from the Parks and Trails Division regarding the consideration of information received and held in confidence relating to negotiations between the municipality, a provincial government, and a third party. And so therefore the agenda be approved as amended.
Do I have a motion to approve? And second, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried.
Are they deliberately muted right now?
Did I hear somebody?
Can everyone hear everything? Okay.
Okay, moving to the adoption of the minutes, that the minutes of the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of October 18th, 2023 be adopted.
Do I have a motion to adopt the minutes? Any changes? No. Motion to approve the minutes and seconded. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried.
Thank you. There's no new business arising from the minutes. We move to the public input period. The public input period is to offer the public an opportunity to comment on agenda items before the committee considers the item. The public input period procedure policy allows for an allotment of 15 minutes where the speaker is welcome to comment on any items on the agenda up to a maximum of 3 minutes. This excludes items that may, are, or have been subject to a public hearing. The speaker should comment in a polite, calm, and courteous manner using respectful language, civility, and decorum.
Do I do what I'm doing?
Welcome, public. Come up to the mic and state your name and provide your input, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Kim Bernard from Area B, Shawnigan Lake, and I'd like to speak to R1 and R2 today. Starting with R1, with gratitude, I would just like to say to the applicant and the board that what a thorough presentation that was, and so great to read about the thought that's gone into the location of this establishment and how tightly regulated it is. And so my request today would be to add to the option before recommended to the board, to add to the referral agencies, because as a resident and a litter picker in my area, we see concerns with dogs ingesting the byproducts of these things that consumers have carelessly tossed. And I'm wondering if veterinarians have statistics on the education piece that might be missing with those customers, and if Parks would take an interest in maybe working with the applicant to be an industry leader in that area to find safe ways to corral that type of litter would be fantastic and add to the overall health and well-being in our area, especially with residents that walk their dogs. Secondly, for R2, I'm a 30-year resident of that part of the Shawnigan Beach Estates, and I'm aware that a trail formerly went through that property under consideration for subdivision, and it seemed to follow the easement that currently is jutting behind that property. So there's unsanctioned trails all through the undeveloped properties nearby, and it was a logical pass-through from Wildflower to McIntosh. And McIntosh isn't labeled on the map, but it's just around the corner from Meadowview on the map that the board was given. And so I'd just like to offer that knowledge as a 30-year resident that it would be really nice for Parks to consider having a trail amenity there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else for public input? Welcome, Ms. Kaufman.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and fellow directors. I would like to speak to R4, the short-term rental properties. I am in favor of it going to the APCs, but I also think that it needs to go to a wider public consultation, whichever way that you feel would be the best way to do that. Maybe go to the APCs first and then go to the public consultation. I think there is a place for short-term rentals, but it does need to be regulated. I am concerned, though, that in the recommendations or in the analysis, number 3 is creating a temporary use permit application opportunity for short-term rental hosts who are not in compliance with the zoning regulations. Madam Chair, in the reference material from the provincial government news release, they are recommending that removing illegal non-conforming rules for short-term rentals, and I think that having a temporary use permit is a workaround what the government is actually working. And as we know, temporary use permits are now a delegated authority to the General Manager of Land Use Services, which really does take it out of the public's eye. The public has no idea who has a temporary use permit and who doesn't. There is an impact, as cited by the government report, to the public with noise, parking, garbage, safety, and disruptions. But on the flip side, there also is a benefit for tourism and affordability. So I would like to support the recommendations of staff, but please remove the reference to temporary use permit. And there's another elephant in the room when it comes to temporary accommodations, which are now seeming to be public, and that is the use of RVs. You go on any public forum, social media forum, and you will see people looking for places to put their RVs or people that are offering their acreages to RVs. Some have hookups and some don't, and it is the same concerns as we have for the short-term rentals, and especially water. Thank you, and I hope we can have a conversation about that sometime soon.
Thank you, Ms. Kaufman. All right, let's move on.
We have no delegations, correspondence, and moving to C1, grant and aid request Electoral Area C, Cobble Hill, regarding Cowichan Valley Hospice Society. That it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid Electoral Area C, Cobble Hill, in the amount of $500 be provided to the Cowichan Valley Hospice Society to support the Cowichan Hospice Donor Community Appreciation Event and fundraising strategy.
It's been moved, seconded, all in favor. Anyone opposed? Motion's carried.
Thank you. C2, another grant and aid, that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid Electoral Area E, Cowichan Station, Satlam, and Glenora in the amount of $4,000 be provided to the Cowichan Green community to support food security programs delivered by Cowichan Green community.
Do I have a mover? Mover, a second? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried.
Thank you. C3, grant and aid, that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid Electoral Area I, Yubo Mead Creek, in the amount of $2,000 be provided to the Cowichan Valley Primary Care Society to support the startup costs of the Cowichan Valley Primary Care Society in their efforts to create a multidisciplinary health center governed by this society.
It's moved, seconded. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried.
Thank you, Chair. There's no information reports, and we move to 8 reports. It's a report from the Development Services Division regarding application RZ23A02 855 Shawnigan Millbay Road, PID 000278122.
Thank you. Hello, Ms. Woods. There we go.
I'll try it again with the mic. Hello, Madam Chair. Hello, committee.
Welcome.
Thank you. So this is a presentation for, as it says, RZ23A02. Next slide, please. The applicant is proposing to amend the South Cowichan zoning bylaw to permit for cannabis storefront retail as a site-specific use on the subject property, which is located on the corner of the Trans-Canada Highway and Shawnigan Millbay Road. And I just want to take this opportunity to apologize for the very small maps in your staff report. It was not my intention to make that difficult for you to see. Next map, please. The CVRD Cannabis Retail Store Policy recommends a number of criteria for reviewing cannabis retail store applications, including setbacks for surrounding uses. The map before you here shows a 300-meter buffer around the subject property and the uses outlined in the cannabis retail store policy. We can circle back to this for questions if you have that at the end. And next slide. So speaking of questions, I did receive a few questions before this presentation. So for the benefit of the directors and members of the public, I just wanted to briefly address them in the public forum here. So first question, were there any internal referrals, comments on this with particular mention of parks? So internal referrals have been sent, and DS staff did actually specifically speak to park staff as well recently. And they've indicated that the Parks and Trails Master Plan does not identify any parkland on the subject property. In addition, the Millbay Historical Church, which is across the Trans-Canada Highway, is not a typical park where lots of the large members of public congregate. So they don't perceive any big risks associated with conflicting uses of cannabis retail store and public park. Any written comments that we do receive from internal divisions will be included in a summary to the EASC when the next report is brought before you. Question 2, should it be referred to Brentwood School as well? Typically, we don't refer to specific schools. However, we do refer to the school district, and this will be referred to the school district. Brentwood was not included. There was previous cannabis retail rezoning that you probably remember from earlier this year, and Brentwood wasn't included on that one either. However, staff did reach out to the applicant and ask them to talk to Brentwood. They did, and we would be happy to do that again. Also just to touch on that, in accordance with the retail store policy, the applicant will have to hold a public information meeting, and anybody within 300 meters will be notified of that meeting. And will the 300-meter buffer be changed in the new zoning bylaw? We don't believe this is going to be changed in the zoning bylaw. However, the storefront retail cannabis policy, sorry, that's really long, is undergoing amendments. At this time, it doesn't appear the 300 meters is going to change, but it will be brought before you probably in the coming months. I'm not working on it. I don't want to speak on behalf of those people. However, it will likely be before you in the coming months. And next slide, please. And there's the recommendation before you. And the applicant is in the room as well if you have any questions.
Mr. Clay, would you like to add anything?
I don't have anything to add at this time, I think.
All right. Any questions? Director Acton?
Do we even have to do all of these referrals? Could we just skip that part? Is that an option?
I believe it is an option under the recommendations. I believe it is option 3. Advance the application without seeking comments from referral agencies.
Director Wilson?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. The question that was brought up about the disposal of waste from these things, that's something which actually I'm quite interested in as well, because we are dog owners, we are pet owners. Is there anything that can be done on something like that? I'm not sure if there's a solution to that. But it is a good point that was brought up.
The woman who spoke earlier.
I can.
Yeah, sorry. The woman who spoke earlier. had
Can
suggested-
you please,
Sorry.
we want to get you on tape.
The person who spoke earlier, we had a brief conversation, and she had suggested that perhaps there could be some kind of, like throughout some of the parks, some kind of disposal stations added for cigarette butts and for cannabis butts or whatever. And that's something I could certainly, maybe we could put some money towards for some of the local trails. But that just came up a few minutes ago, so I haven't had time to look into it. But it's a possible response, other than educating people just to not do that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Good.
even
Thank you.
some signage in your stores would be helpful. Because
Yeah.
Non-dog owners wouldn't know how serious it
No.
is.
One thing we do, we've started to sell these small little, they're like portable pocket ashtrays, so people can just tuck them in there.
That's a good
when
idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they've been very popular, so that's, I don't know how recently she's had her issues, but there are products like that that are available.
Right.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Director Morrison.
Thank you, Chair, through the staff. I read this application with great interest in that we don't get a lot of applications that are so close to the Trans-Canada Highway. And to me, it sort of seemed that you've got the properties and the businesses that are west of the Trans-Canada Highway and the properties to the east. And they're worlds apart. They're 4 lanes of highway apart anyways. So is there any contemplation or weighting of the inputs that we receive based on that, very clearly defining parcel of pavement that separates the east and west and the proximity of the property?
So through the chair, just to clarify, that it would be, you're asking about do we weight the referral comments we receive? We don't typically weight the referral comments in terms of, east versus west. I mean, obviously things that are specifically adjoining, those, it comes back to you and you can decide if specifically neighboring properties are have a more weight than others, but typically they just all come and are presented to you all in one summary without the weighting system.
Anyone else? I have to keep remembering to look at Director Abbott. I have a question. It seems to me it would be more efficient to send the referrals directly to all the schools and ask them at the same time to pass it on to the parent advisory committees, because I'm sure the parent advisory committees are going to be the ones that are most interested in this. I'm unclear why we can't do that, or why we wouldn't want to do that.
So through the chair, I don't believe we have, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Chair or Ms. Pressman, I don't believe we have a policy or anything that says exactly who we are referring to, so much as it's past practice. Perhaps that's a conversation we could have internally about who we do referrals to, but that would be a conversation that I would probably take back to my managers, as I don't have quite as much power as them.
Okay, so let me turn to the director of the area.
I'd like to move the recommendation. I still would like to get information from those external referral agencies. Yeah.
And I have a seconder. Should we make, so is this list fine, or would you like to add to it?
I'm fine with the list.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Thanks.
Thank you.
Moving along, R2, report from the Development Services Division regarding application number RZ 23B02, 2171 Wildflower Road, PID 025002392.
Welcome, Mr. Buchan.
Good afternoon. This application is to rezone the property at 2171 Wildflower Road. If approved, the proposed bylaw amendments would allow the existing property to be subdivided into 2 lots. Next slide, please. On screen is a map showing the location of the subject property, as well as a conceptual plan of subdivision. This application was referred to internal divisions, and preliminary comments have been received and are in attachment D. No concerns were raised internally. The staff recommendation is to advance the application. This means that the application will be referred to external agencies, and those agencies are detailed in the recommendation as well as within the report. External agency feedback would be addressed through subsequent reports to the ESC with the accompanying draft zoning amendment bylaw. Staff note that as this proposal is consistent with the OCP, the CVRD is not required to hold a public hearing. However, the board may still choose to hold one if desired. The recommendation that is for you today is to not hold a public hearing. I'm here for questions. I believe the agent is online. If not, their rationale is attached to the report.
Is Mr. McNeil there?
Yes, I am.
Oh, would you like to add anything?
Not particularly. As far as the reference to the trail, from what I gleaned from, walking the site with the clients, and they've lived there a long time, their garden's pretty well established, and so is the fence. There's a green space that travels behind them, but if anybody's ever been cutting through, that's been trespass. It's strictly an easement for a drainage pipe. So there's no wish to have any sort of trail cut between the 2 lots. In particular, the clients intend to subdivide for a family member, so they're really not going to want a trail in between 2 family homes. Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions? Director Acton.
Yes, thank you. This certainly seems like a no-brainer. And looking at the people across the street all have very small lots and has water and sewer, which is really important. So the only thing, I think the only voice that matters for referral here, I think, are these other 8 lots. So they've all been given on one side of the street the same zoning. It would be great if we just sent those people a letter for comment, and I'm sure then maybe we would solve Mr. Tippett's comment of, why not just rezone the whole street? So maybe could we add that to the list? Either we drop it off or we send a letter. It's pretty easy to get those addresses to each one.
Thank you. We do send out notice. We could certainly take a recommendation to expand that notice.
Great. Would that just happen automatically? Make a motion? Okay. So I would move the recommended motion with added that those neighbors on the other side of the street, you know which ones, are also included.
What do you mean by also included?
Sent notice, in the notice boundary.
Okay, and are we,
They're all on Wildflower, same side of the street,
do we want?
same
do we want-
zoning, same
right.
lots.
But do we want feedback on whether they want to consider
No,
being
just give them
rezoned, or-
notice, that,
Okay.
that 30-meter buffer thing, let them know what's happening. I bet we hear from nobody, but I'm sure they probably won't have a problem with it, but they're the ones who should actually find out.
Yes, I agree. But that wouldn't in and of itself address Mike Tippett's suggestion that all of those lots be rezoned. So
Well, it might in the sense if nobody's against it, then maybe we just include it in our HOCP.
maybe Ms. Sheriff would like to
Madam
comment.
Chair. Thank you very much. I think, yeah, for the purposes of this application, it would be certainly okay to expand the notice radius or area, and that you would, you know, potentially get more input from neighbors. In terms of additional amendments that would affect other properties, I would suggest that be considered as part of a separate staff report or separate process.
Okay.
And not combined with the current application that is before you.
Sounds good. Any more discussion? It's been seconded, thank you. And Ms. Corporate Secretary, do we have motion?
Yes, we do. Thank you. We have that to be recommended to the board, that application number RZ 23B02 2171 Wildflower Road, PID 025002 392, be referred to the following external agencies and First Nations: Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, Ministry of Forest, Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy, First Nations, Ministry of Water, Land and Resource Stewardship, BC Hydro, Electoral Area B, Shawnigan Lake Advisory Planning Commission, Cowichan Tribes, Malahat Nation, and the neighbors on this side of the property of Wildflower, same side as Wildflower.
The same zone, the properties with the same zoning on Wildflower. And 2 and 3, would you like to read those two?
Okay, moving on, and the second recommendation is that the draft zoning amendment bylaw for application number RZ 23B02 2171 Wildflower Road, PID 025002 392 be prepared by staff and forwarded to the board for consideration of first and second reading. And 3, that a public hearing not be held for application number RZ 23B02 2171 Wildflower Road, PID 025002 392, and that notice be undertaken in accordance with the Local Government Act.
Okay, so everyone clear? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you.
Moving along to R3, report from the Development Services Division regarding application number 01C17RS Fisher Road, PID 025580311, PID 027050572, and PID 002315408.
Welcome, Mr. Buck, and this has some history, this application, so you might have to refresh or let the new people know the background. Thank you.
So this is, as you've alluded to, an existing application that's been in process since 2018. It's received first, second, third reading, as well as a public hearing. The board last considered this application in January of this year, where it gave third reading to the zoning amendment bylaw and the related official community plan amendment. The applicant has been working to address the conditions of rezoning approval prior to board consideration of adoption of the amendment bylaws. One of these requirements is to complete a lot boundary adjustment and lot consolidation to clearly identify the future subdivision parcel, which is envisioned to be a mix of business and industrial uses. The owner has an agent have refined the proposed boundaries of the subdivision, which is shown in attachment D. The lot consolidation in attachment D is shown on the first page. The second page shows the future subdivision. The proposed boundaries of the lots are not aligned with the proposed zoning boundaries. The purpose of this report is to introduce revisions to the in-process zoning amendment bylaw to align the proposed zone boundaries with the proposed parcel boundaries. Next slide, please. On screen, you'll see the existing zoning amendment map compared to the proposed revisions. The applicant asked that the CVRD consider modifying the existing zoning amendment bylaw to match the boundaries based off of the proposed parcel boundaries. No modifications to the in-stream official community plan amendment bylaw is necessary. These changes are primarily intended to facilitate road access to the proposed subdivision and to ensure that the proposed lot boundaries are based on the topography of the site. Next slide, please. To accommodate this request, the board must rescind first, second, and third reading of the current zoning amendment bylaw, and then give first and second reading to the revised zoning amendment bylaw, which is attachment C. If it receives first and second reading, a public hearing would be necessary before consideration of third reading, and then we're back where we are today, except the proposed zone boundaries will match the proposed subdivision boundaries. I believe the applicant is available online. If not, they do have a letter of rationale. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Buckles. This is your time. Turn the mic on. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
How's that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we just wanted to make sure that we didn't have a problem with when we go to subdivision later on. This would have created, as it was going to create a split zoning. So the property to the north would have had an oddball alignment. And my thought was if we don't move ahead with this year, maybe even another year or so, we might have different staff and they might just say, hey, we've got to go back and correct this. So we wanted to, there was no hurry. So we felt that after talking to Richard, it was best that we just step back, made this change, and then we don't have any conflict in the future. But the intent is to move ahead, with the subdivision in the spring.
Great. Thank you. Any questions for staff or Mr. Buckles? Okay. Director Acton.
Yeah, so like looking at this property from up top, I don't understand why there was never a trail put through so that the subdivision, people in the subdivision could get to the school.
Okay, we did address that with the Parks Committee. And
Right.
the problem is the grade. On the property to the, at the back of the subdivision, excuse me, of the west end, there's a huge grade difference. So it's something like 6.5 meters vertical, and that's ALR land to that section. So we can't touch it. We actually have to create a step slope retention system to make it work, right? And we took the parks people out there, and they went, well, we don't think we want the trail through the middle of an industrial area too, because you've got on the one side, you've got central landscaping, and then you'd have all of these different industrial lots in between, and they didn't think that was a great idea. So I think the thought was that if anything, they would go down Fisher Road and then in through the next residential subdivision. It would be opposite the old greenhouse site. So yeah, there was no, once they got out there on a Saturday morning, they looked and went, yeah, this isn't going to work. Right?
Okay, I just have a comment.
Yep.
It'd be really great to see Fisher Road have some kind of design planning, or, how does the community see it developing for the future, because there seems to be a lot of mixed use that causes conflict. And so just.
Madam Chair, point of order.
What? I'm allowed to have a comment?
Excuse me, what is your point of order?
My point of order is that this has been in the pipeline since 2018, and what the area director on the other side there is bringing up has been brought up over and over again. It has been discussed, it has gone to local area plans, and yet we're still bringing up things which have nothing to do with this present application.
Thank you.
I'm just talking in
Carry
general,
on.
it'd be great.
Please carry on.
Thank you, that it would be great for the community to have a vision for Fisher Road, because it is struggling in its youth.
Thank you.
Good Lord.
Any more? Director Morrison.
Thank you, Chair, through to staff. So I read this start to finish, and I guess it's fortunate for the new folks here, because I'm feeling kind of embarrassed about the length of time that this has taken, and you folks don't need to be, because it's people before you. This is an application that I think has had merit from the beginning, and we've sort of looked at it from every angle, up, down, sideways. I think even the question raised by Director Acton has been in the mix there. And so my question through to staff is, if we proceed with the recommended resolution, it goes to the board at the next meeting, it's considered, do we have a timeline where we can, let these folks get down to business and get some work done and reap the benefits of what's now a 5-year process?
In terms of timeline, I don't have a timeline per se, but the next steps would be to hold a public hearing and then bring that back for third reading.
As a follow-up, I would, once again, if this is successful in being moved forward, I would recommend that we try to expedite this. It's been in the hopper long enough. Thank you.
I'll turn to the director of the area.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I'd go with the staff recommendation, which is option 1.
It's been moved and seconded. Any more discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried.
Moving on to R4, report from the General Manager, Land Use Services Department regarding short-term rental regulations. Recommendation, that it be recommended to the board that staff be directed to consult with the Electoral Area Advisory Planning Commissions on the topic of short-term rentals, and that staff review and provide recommendations to the Electoral Area Services Committee on potential amendments to short-term rental regulations.
Welcome, Ms. Gerald.
Thank you, Madam
Our
Chair.
favorite topic.
Good afternoon, everyone. So staff prepared this report in response to the provincial initiative involving short-term rentals and the introduction of the Short-Term Rental Accommodation Act that received royal assent on, it was October 26th. And it's my understanding that regulations will be forthcoming. So we obviously are in a situation where short-term rentals are driving some changes in our communities, contributing to social and economic challenges, quite a bit of displacement of people, impacts on services like healthcare and education and so on. And we've seen a tremendous growth in online accommodation platform listings in BC. So previously, there's been discussion at Committee of the Whole on the MRDT and the increase in the revenue from that source. And so we know that the number of short-term rentals is growing or has grown significantly over the past few years, despite the fact that most of the zoning in our electoral areas does not permit them. So we know that people are either not aware of the zoning regulations or don't care about the zoning regulations. So in response to the provincial initiative, the CBRD will have some options. And those will include the option to get into business licensing, so adopting business licensing authority and licensing short-term rental uses. The other is to opt into the provincial scheme, which is to basically create a registry of short-term accommodation listings to require that if there is a short-term rental that occur on a property where there's a principal residence that is permanently occupied, so that the short-term rental is actually secondary to a residential use, not the primary use of the property. And there are a number of other things that the province has proposed, including the ability for the regional district to set much larger fines, so maximum penalty of up to $50,000, which is pretty significant for regional districts. There's a proposal to share the registry information with local governments. And then also for the province to share the registry information with federal governments. So they're looking at this from a taxation perspective as well. So there are a lot of things to discuss. What staff are proposing is that as a starting point, consultation with your advisory planning commissions. First of all, to look at the different electoral area zoning bylaws. There are some consistencies and there are some differences, and we do have some zoning bylaws that do in some cases enable short-term rentals. It's probably not intentional, but that is there. So there's an opportunity to review the respective bylaw provisions around temporary accommodation, short-term rentals with your APCs, and to look at coming up with some consistent definitions and terms. So in the act that was just passed by the provincial government, they have defined secondary suite, they've defined accessory dwelling, they've defined short-term accommodation, and they're looking at that being for a period of less than 90 consecutive days. Most of our zoning bylaws refer to 30 days. So there's some things that we should be considering in terms of, well, you know, what is a short-term or temporary accommodation in CBRD electoral areas. So consultation with APCs on those things, and then also asking whether or not there's room in the communities, or if there's an appetite in the communities to see some short-term rentals. And is there an opportunity to look at a temporary use permit scheme that would potentially accommodate short-term rentals in certain cases? And just for clarification, CBRD electoral areas have very limited TUP authorities right now, with the exception of electoral area D. They're pretty limited throughout the CBRD electoral areas, and temporary use permit authority has not been delegated to staff. That would be a question for this committee, should you choose to amend or adopt new temporary use permit provisions. So there's that. And then kind of the fourth point in the list of the recommendations there was looking at proactive bylaw enforcement. And I didn't specify in the recommendation that we go ahead and do that, because that's contingent upon staffing, and it's related to a supplemental budget request that will come before you as part of your budget package. I think I'm going to stop there. I did provide a second option. There was an option to do broader consultation, which could also occur. However, that does also have budgetary implications, and staff would need direction to come back with a supplementary budget proposal around that. We would be asking, if that was the committee's will, the board's will, we would be looking for a consultant to undertake that work. We expect that it would be, it's not a preferred, it's not a recommendation, because we expect it to be a highly divisive issue, and that we may not really get clear consensus. So we would ask that you start with your APCs and perhaps go from there.
Right, so any questions, but before we start, I just want to be clear. So would the short-term rental issue be addressed through the zoning modernization? Like, will there be some discussion about issues like appropriate areas for short-term rentals as part of the modernization process, or not?
Madam Chair, yes, absolutely. However, what staff are suggesting is that we could advance that discussion, and that we are...
and if we need to advance it, we would have to hire someone to help do that.
What I'm suggesting is that if you want to do broader public consultation in the form of community surveys, workshops, open houses, those sorts of things, that we would hire a consultant to do that work. But that the alternative would be that staff would consult with the APCs on this particular topic and get the input from the representatives that you've appointed to be, representatives of your respective communities. And then to come back and have a further discussion about potential options at that point.
Questions for Ms. Charles? Mr. Director McClinton.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, through to the staff. I mean, I think part of this for me or some of the community members is just around terminology. I mean, I know we allow bed and breakfasts, like up to 3 rooms. Can you maybe just differentiate the difference between a short-term rental and somebody that's operating a bed and breakfast?
Through you, Madam Chair. So some of our zoning bylaws and various zones do permit bed and breakfast operations, and typically they require that their bed and breakfast is accessory to a principal dwelling that's owner occupied, and that, it's a service where breakfast is provided. These aren't individual or independent units. That's kind of a key distinction. But yeah, that can be part of the discussion with APCs. I mean, there may be concerns about bed and breakfast operations as well.
Yeah. If I can just add some comments. I know for me, what my biggest concern is especially like lots of young families who've just had to save up a tremendous amount of money to, buy their first piece of property. It's, 10, 15 times what their annual salary is, and maybe they've got a suite and they're trying to rent it out. Those are the people that I'm thinking about in this tough market. For me, there's a big distinction between, somebody that's not living in a community that's renting out homes in the short term. I know I read the provincial report. There was one person in Vancouver that had over 130 condo units downtown Vancouver, and I don't think that's what pops into people's minds when they hear short-term rentals. So, for me, anyways, there's differentiating between second, third, fourth property and somebody that's maybe just trying to make ends meet in their basement. I'm just looking here again. I'm really looking forward to this process. I'm going to be supporting it. I think going to the APC, I think there's a place for short-term rentals. We don't have the hotels that we need in our area, but even more, we look at there. I'm just reading here. There's 1,000 listings in the CVRD. I mean, last I heard, I think our housing stock is short 500 units per year, every year. I mean, this is something that we should be taking care of. But I mean, for me, I just don't want it to be a distraction from what we really need to do in terms of making sure we have the housing stock for people to live in our communities. So those are just a couple things I'm thinking about. A couple last little points here, and a little out of scope, but Canada's last in the G7 for the housing per capita. We've got a lot of work to do. I mean, this is just a drop in the bucket. And I know we can't do anything about the BC Residential Tenancy Act, but I mean, I think that's one thing that pushes a lot of folks to go into the short term. So just keeping all of those things mindful. But yeah, I think this is a great first step.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Director Abbott.
Thank you, Chair. And taking advantage of what you've already raised, I wonder whether staff, before enlisting further consultants, we're just about wrapping up the step one of the visioning program that's offered by Ms. Breen. Can we not introduce this dialogue in future visioning steps as we work on our local area plans? And then gleaning from that and taking that information to the APCs. I'd rather hear from neighbors who are directly impacted than perhaps 8 people that make up my little area D. You may have answered that, Ms. Charles, but I'd appreciate more.
Go for it.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So I have not read all of the comments that have been collected through the various local area plan sessions, but I know that short-term rentals has been a fairly significant topic of conversation. And it varies from area to area. There are some communities that are very upset about short-term rentals, and then there are others that may be more open to the idea of them. But we certainly know that it is an issue that is impacting housing within the region. And we are already going to be going out to APCs to talk about accessory or secondary housing options and potential amendments around those. So it does fit that we have this conversation at the same time, because it will inevitably be part of that conversation.
If I may, just a follow-up, perhaps we could put a very targeted question in future lab sessions so that it's on there and we're actively trying to get responses. I know neighbors can be quite vociferous if they live next to somebody that is using a large residence and it is not being resided in by the principal owner. So thank you.
Is there a particular timeline for when the province is going to introduce their legislation, and what do we have to get done before that happens if we want to act quickly?
I might defer to Ms. Pressman, who was with provincial staff last week and might be able to respond to the question about the timeline.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have my notes in front of me from that meeting last week, but there are going to be a number of steps
in the rollout of it, and so I think that the regulations are expected in the spring of 2024. The first part of the regulations and allowing business licensing and ticketing, those changes. The provincial registry isn't expected until the end of next year or beginning of 2025.
So then if I could just ask one more question, and then I'm going to turn to Director Acton and Director Morrison. If we went out to APCs, how quickly could we do that and get the information back?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I would, neither Lauren Wright nor Mike Tippett is here today. However, my understanding is that they expect to go out to the APCs fairly soon on the secondary dwelling discussion so that would happen within over the next 2 to 3 months. So we would be coming back to you in the early part of 2024. I would think February would be.
So we could expect something by the end of February.
Yeah, and I think this is timely. We are, waiting for the province to roll out they've adopted the act, but they need to work on the regulations that will implement the act, and so we'll see what that legislation looks like, and we'll be sort of better prepared to respond to that and to give you, to respond to questions about, how to opt in and that sort of thing at that time.
Director Acton.
Thank you. So for all, I guess one question is, do we even have to do all of this? Could we just wait and see what the legislation looks like exactly and what other electoral areas end up doing?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Director Acton. Yes, absolutely. You can decide to not take any action at all and simply wait and see what the impact of the provincial legislation is. Because the CVRD electoral areas are exempt from that, I suspect that there may not be a tremendous amount of change. And we do need to do this consultation as part of the comprehensive zoning bylaw development anyway. So in my mind, it makes sense to do this at the current time. I mean, we are in a housing crisis. We have people, looking at potentially looking at a temporary use permit scheme that might provide for emergency housing or temporary housing, in ways that aren't normally considered, might be a humane thing to do.
Right. Well, for all the reasons that Director McClinton mentioned, looking in a crystal ball here in our future, it's just massive undertaking of suddenly doing business licenses and you're right, if we can do that for certain things, but to head down this road completely, I think is a big item. And are we really gonna make a big difference? People will find a workaround, but anyway, if it's information that we can use and we have the opportunity to opt out later, that's a good thing.
Director Morrison.
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I could just say that, at this point in time, there's no recommendation for the CVRD to opt in or to start, to enact business licensing. That isn't the intent. The intent of this current recommendation is just to consult with your APCs on this particular topic, and then we would come back, and then, those other questions could be considered potentially at that time.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And I'm going to beg the indulgence of everyone here. I've been living and breathing this file for a year and a half, and not a day goes by when I'm not approached by community members. We've got a couple of lightning rod files in my area, and so I've made some notes. I'll try and stick to them. I'm actually a little nervous and feeling very passionate about this. And I think there's a number of things to consider, and I've been listening to what my colleagues have been saying. And so I'll just start with the fact that we're in a housing crisis, and for the most part, virtually all of these platform-based commercial operations are illegal. They don't meet the zoning. So, that's right from the get-go. Like, I've actually got a zone in my electoral area zoning bylaw that provides for it, but not in the heart of already established areas. They're illegal, and we have adopted legislation, and the province is painting a pretty clear path forward. And that is that, and this is my humble opinion, but I've heard it from others, that the legislation is designed to convert back a number of units, and I'd say a lot of them, that were taken out of the long-term rental housing stock, put into commercial operation in residential areas, and the legislation is designed to put them back, to get them back into the circulation for families and people in lower socioeconomic, and income brackets, to be able to put a roof over their head for them and their families. It's already been mentioned that tax evasion in this field is rampant, and if, consider it at our level, commercial operations in residential zones. Do you think any of them are actually being taxed as commercial operations? Which they are, which would be appropriate. So a loss of revenue at the local government level, business revenue at the provincial level, and income tax level at the federal level. And my understanding, it's rampant. Are the operators on these platforms declaring all of their income? And is that fair to our tax system? There's one area that I think it's sort of already been mentioned, but not maybe discussed in great context, is the multi-generational vacation home that have been in people's families for years and years. And I don't see an issue with those property owners, renting it to Uncle Bob's family for a week in the summertime. That's not where we're having issues. It's in the commercialization of our residential housing stock. We already have zoning. Like, this is what is so profound to me. We allow bed and breakfasts in most zones. Those are principal residence, owner-occupied bed and breakfast. Now, I think we need to do some tweaking for the additional dwelling unit, carriage homes, basement suites. I think that there could be some tweaking of our existing zoning to allow for that person that Jesse was just talking about, people that have got into this platform for mortgage helping. It makes sense. We don't want people who are in that circumstance, they're living in the home, they need the additional income to be able to meet their payments. I totally get that, and that makes sense. I have grave concerns about temporary use permits. And I attended a Strata 1339 meeting, and I'm telling you that of the 40 some odd residents, a couple of the commercial operators were already looking for grandfathering, already looking for that opportunity to be able to continue to run their commercial business right in the middle of residential areas. And I think that if we're going to contemplate temporary use permits, it should be at the very end of a process. I think that, I'm going to skip something that I've got at the end there, but, I've been here long enough to know that this is not going to be done in 12 months. This is going to be 18 to 24 months if we're lucky. And I'd like to begin by signaling that to people that might be either thinking to get into this business or think of expanding into this business, that's just not on. That we support people that want to have a legitimate, maybe somewhat modified bed and breakfast operation to help mortgage payment, additional income. But people that are non-resident that are operating these as businesses, the provincial legislation is designed to get those properties back occupied by families, by people that probably a lot of working poor in this province. So I think that's an important note that we have to make. And, you know, I'm just going to look at the time frame. And I know that as I was reading the staff report and seeing the suggestion that there would need to be additional resources to engage in this process, like, it's not on with me. I don't see how we go to the community and we go to our taxpayers and say, oh, we need some extra so that we can deal with something that we already know is illegal, and we just haven't been able to get the resources together to properly enforce it. My community is looking for the CVRD, or at the very least, Area F, to opt into the principal residence provision ASAP. And while it may not have effect in law, it's certainly going to signal to people that are thinking of expanding into these platforms. It's going to give them a signal that we're not really interested in that kind of commercial business in our residential areas. So I just, you know, just a note, I've got perfect examples of the people that just at the end of 2018 into COVID moved to my community as a family because they could afford to buy a property in Honeymoon Bay or Missachi Lake. And a year into COVID, that it's like a switch got flipped. The investors came in, and all those houses that could have had families in them and contributing to the volunteer fire department, contributing to the Honeymoon Bay Community Society, and kids at the bus stop or school bus stop in the morning, it flipped, and they're empty. They're empty 9 months of the year. And that's a shame in a small community of, you know, 100 homes, or Missachi is 80 homes. It's a hollowing out, and you've heard me say that over and over again. So I'm going to suggest that, unlike our director across the way, that we need to make this a priority. I want to make it a priority for my electoral area, and I want to take the immediate steps if I can. And I'd hope I'd have the support of everybody around this table, because this is going to get worse before it gets better. And I think as this is a defining, if I don't stand for something, I'm going to fall for anything. That's the way I see this. This is that important of an issue. So maybe I'll just ask Ms. Sherolf, timeline, 18 to 24 months, maybe longer, before we have a fully implemented business license. Maybe by the time we're looking at temporary use permits, how long would you anticipate it would take us? Oh, I guess that would depend on whether or not we allocate additional resources too, wouldn't it?
Madam Chair, so again, my recommendation was that we go out to APCs, and I'm not recommending at this point that we embark on business licensing. That would be a discussion for a subsequent meeting, and I'm not prepared to commit to a timeline to completing a program right now. Thank you.
But you do think we could come back from the APCs with a report by the end of February?
I do.
Okay. Director Martman.
Thank you, Chair, and interesting comments. I guess I just want to back up a little bit and look at the background and ask a question around the 1,000 active listings. I'm wondering if those are listings in electoral areas only, or is that across the entire CVRD? Trying to get a magnitude of the problem.
So the listings would likely be for the CVRD as a whole, but if you look at the mapping, you'll see that there's a significant density of uses around our major lakes, right?
Yeah.
Like Cowichan and Shawnigan.
I have a couple follow-ups. Okay, thank you. And so the second piece is then, are we in lockstep, or are we in coordination with municipalities on how they are moving forward?
So Madam Chair, through you, municipalities, obviously, they have their own official community plans and zoning bylaws and set policies around land use planning because we're not operating under, a common regional growth strategy. So no, we don't coordinate on those particular things. Of course, you know that there's a workforce housing strategy that's nearing completion, and one of the recommendations in that report will be around addressing short-term rentals with some recommendations that would be given to both CBRD and to the municipalities. But no, at this point in time, we don't have sort of a common sort of sentiment or approach. And I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. Municipalities are not the same as electoral areas. There are some different factors to consider. Yeah.
I guess the last question, because moving, this will take time, whether whoever has the crystal ball for that one. How do you see this lining up with our draft strategic plan as it is right now?
So, Madam Chair, through you, that's a difficult question to answer since we don't have a finalized strategic plan. I know that there has been some discussion about short-term rental enforcement, but until I think that plan is in its final big form, we don't know. But certainly we're hearing that that's the direction.
Right, and I guess that's my final comment on this, is that as I would want to go forward and get more information from the APCs, not go out to the public with a consultant at this time, and also by the time that happens, I'm hoping our strategic plan will be finalized, and you'd have that to also put into your report when you come back.
Sure, and then I have one more thing for you.
Through you, Madam Chair. Sorry, this is kind of low, but I'm also tall. So we're speaking to the strategic plan. Yes, we are working on the final version of that document after having gone through a number of meetings to revise the last version. The goal is to get that on committee. I don't have it in my hands as a refreshed version right now, so it would be hard pressed to get it on the next committee of the whole. The one following, I'm confident that it will be ready for your review at that point.
Ms. Terrell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For Director Morrison's benefit, I wanted to add that the CBRD could also decide, the board could also decide to move forward with a request to opt in for one or more electoral areas at any time. As the act is in place, it would just mean that there would be some work to do around how we would apply the provincial scheme in the absence of a business licensing program at the immediate time. But certainly, as a symbolic move, the CVRD board could request to the province of BC that one or more electoral areas opt into the program. So it can be all electoral areas or one or some electoral areas. It doesn't have to be all.
But it might be more efficient to wait until we hear back from the APCs at the end of February. Is that?
I would leave that with you.
All right.
To decide.
Director McClinton.
Through the chair, yeah, I first just want to thank my colleague, Director Morrison, for his comments. Just reflecting on last night, taking my 4-year-old daughter out trick-or-treating, walking across the street, house to house, everybody answering the door. Most of them are pretty retired, but everybody's living there, and just really that sense of community that I'm lucky enough to live in, and how challenging that must be in some of the areas where these full homes are taken out of stock, and so just I think that was really helpful for me to sort of hear that. I think this is one of those things where we need to kind of roll up our sleeves and get engaged with our communities. It's going to be a little bit messy, most likely, but yeah. So I'm just all in favor of taking this to the APCs, hearing what they have to say, and hearing from our communities. And I think we all live and work. Everybody's sitting at this board table, and we want the best for our communities. And I think this is, possibly a powerful first step. So, unless other people have questions, I would like to move the motion, the recommendation.
And do I have a seconder? I have a seconder. Any more discussion? I haven't heard from Director Segal or Director Deck or Director Wilson. You haven't weighed in. But you will.
I will, purely to say that what's been said already by Director McClinton and Director Morrison makes perfect sense to me. And it's a lot of the stuff that Ms. Yeroff has come up with, we can do this. It's just a question how and when.
All right. Anyone like to add anything more? Okay, Director Segal.
And just that I look forward to hearing from the APCs and making our next steps from there. I am interested in more broader community engagement, but not right now.
And Director Deck.
Well, the sense of community is so important to all of us, and if those short-term rentals are having an impact, and I believe they are, then I think it's wonderful that we're going to reach out to the local advisory, the planning commissions, and hear from them. Because also loss of revenue, that came through to me loud and clear. So on every level, I support option one.
All right. So Director Abbott, did we hear from you?
You did. I expressed interest in incorporating these into the step processes that are going on. And I would prefer to see that happen concurrent with APCs because we're out listening to the public, our residents, and not just a select few.
Okay. So the recommendation is to consult as part of the general secondary, secondary dwellings or something that Mike and Lauren are doing? What is it they're going out to the APCs for?
So the recommendation is that staff be directed to consult with the APCs on the topic of short-term rentals, and staff review and provide recommendations to the EASC on potential amendments to short-term rental regulations.
Right, but the idea is that you're going to
matter of
integrate
practice.
that into another APC
We will
consultation.
piggyback that on the consultation.
Right, so it's not like we're going to add too much extra work.
That's right.
Right, by going to the APCs. All right, so I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Director Morrison.
Madam Chair, through you to staff, would it be helpful at this point to ask that staff be directed to prepare a path forward report on electoral area opting in provision? Because, I don't want to get the report come whenever it comes and then have to begin the process of how do we do the opting in. I think it could be done concurrently, and I'd ask for my colleagues' support in getting a report done that is written while the staff are consulting with our advisory planning commissions. So I would move that.
Well, before you do that, let me just hear from Ms. Cheryl, whether that's possible or...
Madam Chair, I think that staff should be able to report back. We can consult with the province and bring a report back either to the next EASC or the EASC thereafter on the steps to opt in.
And, okay, so a motion would be helpful.
Yes, please.
So moved.
And it's been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Did you get that? Sorry, I went a little fast.
I've got it typed and recorded, so.
Oh, perfect.
We're moving to 9 unfinished business.
Well, we're just at the end here.
Never mind.
We're at the end. We don't want to break.
10, new business and question period. That the question period is an opportunity to offer the public to ask a question regarding business of CVRD. The question period allows for an allotment of 15 minutes and is comprised of 2 parts. The first is reserved for questions directly related to the agenda items. If there is time remaining, questions on matters of public interest related to and in the CVRD jurisdiction. Each questioner is permitted to ask one question plus one follow-up question related to the answer. The question must be truly a question and not a statement of opinion or speech. Questioners must avoid personal references, insinuations, violent, offensive, or disrespectful remarks about another person, and unparliamentary in language. If the question is not able to be answered today, it will be provided at the next open EASC meeting. Thank you.
We have a closed session after, so we will take a break before going into closed, okay? So any questions? Please come to the mic and state your name.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Kim Bernard, Area B, Shawnigan Lake, and I have a question based on the recent discussion for R4. And could you please clarify that what I heard was that of the approximately 1,000 listings, that a lot of those are clustered around the two recreationally used lakes, Cowichan Lake and Shawnigan Lake, is that correct?
That's what I heard.
From staff?
I don't think there's another, maybe Quamich, I don't know. Yeah, those would be the two main ones, I think.
The two main ones, okay.
And maybe some of the rivers. I don't know.
And so my follow-up question would be, would the APCs be given a list of those properties? Is that how the decision-making works at the APC level?
I don't think so. I think those are lists that are on the web that you could search yourself, yeah.
Thank you. I did look up the news press release from the government regarding this, and they mentioned 4 of the platforms, so I'll have some homework to do.
Yeah.
And I guess my follow-up to that question is that publicly available information that the APCs will be meeting to discuss that topic?
Yes, they publish the...
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
My name's Susan Kaufman, and I'm from Satlam. I stand corrected, Ms. Charoff, on the temporary use. Madam Chair, but could I ask, does the GM of Land Use Services have the ability to renew without coming before the board? No? Okay, thank you. Good to know. Madam Chair, this is on an entirely different topic, but it is the topic of fireworks. And I'm wondering, our area was once again just descended upon by an ungodly amount of fireworks. How is the public to know if a person has a permit to let them off? Are the permits listed somewhere?
No, they're not. I think you'd have to phone.
So, Madam Chair, my point with that is, how do people prepare themselves and their animals if we don't know that permits have been extended?
Thank you, Ms. Coffin. That's a good question. So it is a challenging issue, and we do have changes coming down the pipe. Unfortunately, they were not in place before Halloween night, and so it's tied up with provincial having to review bylaws or whatever. But hopefully it will be done before New Year's, I would hope, and if not, we should take a much more proactive information campaign again, like we've done in the past, I think.
Madam Chair, that's good to hear. Unfortunately, I did not see a single advertisement from the CVRD on their Facebook page regarding fireworks this year. They did on their Instagram, but not on their Facebook page. And I'd like to relate an incident. Last night, fireworks were let off, and a livestock guard dog was frightened and got away from its owner and ended up in the middle of the Cowichan River on a rock outcropping, which necessitated the rescue of that dog by somebody in a Zodiac. So that's putting that person at risk too. We need to do better We need to really get behind this and help protect the people and the animals that live in our rural areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we move into close, we'll take a short break, 10 minutes. Right at 3 o'clock, we'll be back. Oh, yes, we have to tell you why we're going into closed.
We'll be going into closed session, that the motion to the meeting be closed to the public in accordance with the Community Charter, Part 4, Division 3, Section 90, subsections as noted previously. Under 2B, the consideration of information received and held in confidence relating to negotiations between the municipality and the provincial government, or the federal government, or both, or between the provincial government or federal government, or both, and a third party.
And that's been moved and seconded. All in favor? 10 minutes, thank you.